This week, the president's tax reform plan won partial support. It passed the Senate from a 51 to 49 vote, with only one GOP senator voting against it. So what does this mean? Joining me now is the head of the JU Public Policy Institute, News4JAX's political analyst, Rick Mullaney. Rick, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So this seems to be doing somewhat well with the Senate Republicans getting all but one, which is better than we've seen some of the votes recently.
Well, we need to separate out the budget resolution from the tax proposal. What passed yesterday was the Senate passing the budget, and it paves the way for reconciliation, meaning they can't filibuster the tax proposal. It also paves the way for about $1.5 trillion in subsidized debt, which may come from this proposal. So on the one hand, you have the budget. On the other hand, you have the tax proposal. And by the way, the tax proposal is just a 9-page outline. We don't have all the details yet.
Why is this important to the Trump administration and congressional Republicans right now, getting some sort of tax revision done?
This is a really big deal for lots of reasons, and one is obvious politics. Donald Trump and congressional Republicans desperately need a legislative win. They really do, especially on the heels of the failure to repeal and replace Obamacare. And typically for Republicans, you would think tax policy would be right in their wheelhouse. So it's really, really important. This proposal is very sweeping, maybe the most sweeping since 1986. It's very significant, but I think it's going to undergo some...
Sweeping, what does that mean? So what would it do? I mean, what would be a big sweeping change that we would see?
Big picture, corporate tax rates would come down from 35% to 20%. That's the first reduction in more than 30 years.
Republicans would probably like that. Democrats may not.
Actually, I think on the corporate tax rate, you may see there's some bipartisan support, a recognition that lowering corporate tax rates is necessary to make us more competitive. For businesses that aren't corporations, for sole proprietorships, for partnerships, it's also helpful because there's a pass-through rate of 25%. For individuals, you and me, and for most of our viewers, the brackets get reduced to 3, 12%, 25%, and 35%. The standard deductions get doubled, but on the other hand, you lose personal exemptions and some itemized deductions.
You might get a pushback from blue states because of deduction. It might eliminate some deductions for like state and local income tax. Is that right?
Very much so. That's a very, very big issue. In the attempt to simplify taxation, which is one of the goals here is to simplify things, reduce brackets, increase standardized deductions, but there's also the elimination of state and local taxes. For us in Florida, that means property taxes, but for other states in particular, California, New York, New Jersey, high state income taxes that they currently are able to deduct. I think you're going to see senators and congressional leaders in House opposing that sort of elimination.
The president has struggled to get a travel ban imposed. The president has struggled to get the repeal and replace on the Affordable Care Act. If he struggles, if the administration struggles with tax reform, what does that do to the Republican Party?
The stakes are very, very high for Donald Trump, and quite frankly, they're very high for congressional leaders.
Because they have to be reelected in about a year and a month.
A year from next month is the midterm elections. The House Republicans in particular are very vulnerable. The Senate side sets up a little differently because of geography. Given the failure to pass anything significant legislation, particularly on health care, the stakes are even higher for this tax proposal. I think the odds do not favor passing it by the end of the year. I do think you see some sort of tax reform passed early next year, or before the election at least.
And taxes, as we've been hearing, can be convoluted and complex, hard to follow. Could this be easier to pass in like the Affordable Care Act, where you can put someone out there who says, I'm going to lose my health care if you take this away or if you change things? Taxes are harder to follow and maybe easier to get through, would you say?
Healthcare legislation, healthcare policy is very, very difficult, very personal, very hard to pass, and very, very complex. However, I wouldn't suggest that tax reform is easy. It might be easier in some ways, but it is a heavy lift. It is very difficult. And there are a lot of lobbying interests that have specific interests and specific deductions. So if anyone believes this is easy, I think they're making a mistake. This will be a very heavy lift, but this is more in the wheelhouse for Donald Trump, who's actively engaged. It is in the wheelhouse of Republicans. The odds of passing something are much higher.
Rick Mullaney, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. You can watch all the political news that you need to know going on the special politics page on our website, news4jax.com/politics.